Hello and welcome to India Career Center, the one-stop podcast for students, professionals, parents, and guardians. In every episode, we will try to deal with a current topic that needs expert advice related to career guidance, and career mentoring. Please welcome your host, Dr. S.P. Mishra, to the show. And happy listening.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to one more episode on India Career Center. And the topic is technology dominance in the decade of disruptions and opportunities. To talk about this particular subject, we have a very special guest, Mr. Sanjeev Arora, who has been an industry leader and a thinker. Mr. Arora held key leadership positions in JCB, General Motors, CNH, Ford Tractors in areas of product strategy, business development, innovation, manufacturing, R&D, product development, digital transformation, alternative fuels, zero emission initiatives, and so on. I think the list goes on. His last assignment was with JCB headquarters as Group Managing Director and member of the Group Executive Board. And I am happy to share Mr. Arora has kindly agreed to join us from down under. He is in fact joining us from Australia today, from Melbourne. Sir, thank you. Despite this time zone difference, you agreed to do this podcast today. And through your insight, through your wisdom, I think a lot of our young listeners who are students or who are professionals will get a lot of knowledge and insight from you. Thank you for being with us.
SP, thank you very much. You're very kind, and thanks for accommodating all the time zones and the challenges we had. And it's a privilege to be really part of your channel and part of your show.
Thank you so much. Sir, to start with, obviously, we definitely like to understand about your early life, your early education, and how things have shaped you to what you are today. So take us through your personal journey.
Yeah, SP, during our lifetimes, we have seen the world changed a lot, I would say. So we were all born into an era when there was no mobile phones, there was no internet, there was no information. I actually born and brought up into a small town in Punjab, a town called Kapurthala, where I was born. And practically we had no access to the information. I wish the generation today should be very lucky, as they really have a lot of empowerment at their fingertips, which everybody must use. And of course, during my early childhood, I didn't know what I had to do. But of course, as we grew up, everybody knew that you had to just score some marks and get into either becoming a doctor or an engineer. And that's how our journey really started. And I was lucky to really have my first break to work with the most respected brand of that time, which was into the agricultural equipment sector. That's how I started. In fact, half of my career has been into the agricultural equipment. I worked briefly in General Motors, which I was looking into portfolio planning and the product strategy for General Motors in India, but that was very brief. And after that, last decade and a half plus has been actually into the core construction equipment sector. So I've been very lucky and privileged to see all dimensions of the mobility sector, as we call it today, both on highway and off highway.
Yeah, fascinating. And you, as you rightly said, I think today the access to information is far better. And I think the parents and children both have that access to a lot of information. And unlike the previous generation, obviously today it is possible to really curate your own professional career and start really early. I think when you are in the early school, I mean you are in high school or college, you can actually take scientific support in terms of knowing what is good for you scientifically and really work on them. And that's something the privileged lot of today can get it, which we didn't have. I think we all actually curated our own path as we went along it, and that story resonates with me as well. So thank you for sharing that. Moving on, sir. We all know that India is today is a 3 trillion US dollar economy, and there are aspirations to reach to the 5 trillion. In fact, the 5 trillion mark was supposed to be achieved very recently, but then obviously that's going to take some time. But the aspirations are there. So, and for India to grow to those higher GDP growth areas, infrastructure is going to play an important role. And for infrastructure, obviously the role of automotive sector, both on highway as well as off highway, are going to play a very important role. And you spending almost entire life of yours in terms of the automotive sector, I think you can actually give us the insight on how you see that panning out in terms of the growth for the industry, and how that is going to impact in terms of the growth of Indian economy.
Yeah, as we know, very relevant question, and very relevant question for India and India's youth who are going to shape up the future of our country. You know, the world as we stand today, if you look into USA, Japan, Germany, and China, not in that order, they basically contribute more than 50% of world's GDP today. But as somebody said, that this century belongs to India. You know, this decade belongs to India, definitely. And I think this decade is going to make and break the winners and losers of tomorrow. I think by projections that we read today, that by 2030, I think by 2031 to be precise, India is going to be overtaking France to become the sixth largest economy by GDP. I'm talking absolute contribution, not by the purchase power parity, which means that we'll be crossing something like 6.8 trillion, which means our 5 trillion should happen sometime before that, versus 2025, which was the initial target of the Prime Minister. That ambition probably is going to be certainly achieved much before that. Now, for that to happen, if we have to be $6-7 trillion GDP, we have to do some things differently, not just the infrastructure, but the entire gamut of activity that India needs to proceed. So I have 2 points before I move on to the industry question. Firstly, I think India has a huge advantage in terms of its people and the what you call demographic advantages, the age and the population. I think by that time, we also will probably be the largest population in the world, which is like 1.6 billion. But that has to be treated as an asset. While it is an asset, it has to also generate employment, which I think we'll cover this later. But coming back to GDP, I believe that we cannot replicate the China model. What China did 30 years ago to become the largest, along with the US, two largest economies in the world, 1990s. At this point of time, we can't do that, as they deployed a large workforce. They threw people at and made factories. And I think in today's time, we have to leverage technology while therefore leveraging our people's strength. Firstly, I'll touch upon that manufacturing sector has to play a very, very important role into this journey to become the $6 trillion, $7 trillion economy by 2030. Today, I think manufacturing contributes about 18% of our GDP. It has to be 25% plus, not just the services sector, but manufacturing sector. Now, within manufacturing, if you take the mobility sector, the automotive sector, the agri sector, the construction sector, they have to play a huge role into this journey of becoming the $6 trillion plus economy by 2030. If I think the projections are by 2035, India will be the largest population in the world. As I said earlier, about I think 1.6 billion people will have. So how do we harness this greatest asset that we have is really going to be the thought leadership and the innovation that we as a country need to be bringing about. And that's where all these industries we spoke about will play a part.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think on the India's demographic dividend or demographic advantage, what you mentioned, I clearly foresee that apart from India and some of the Asian countries and large part of African nations will actually drive the next 1 billion people on this earth, which is going to be a great opportunity. At the same time, as you rightly mentioned or cautioned, that if we don't harness the strength of this population, we can actually get into a problem. So I fully clearly see that, and I keep talking about this particular fact in all other podcasts related to education and mentoring, is that children in India who are born between 1997 to 2011, they constitute 37 crore right now out of 140 crore or 1.4 billion. And this is the cohort which is going to be the demographic advantage or dividend for India. But this particular cohort, if we don't harness in the right manner in terms of using the technology and bringing about gainful employability or gainful professional engagement, it could be a costly affair for the country. And we cannot afford to do that. I'm sure we have those capabilities. I think our leaderships also have that clear mandate in their mind in terms of doing that. And obviously, industries and more so manufacturing and more so the automotive sector are going to play a major role in that. So thank you for bringing that angle of looking at future and looking at how we can harness the youth of India. So going on to the next one, and you mentioned about technology. So technology is one of the biggest trends which are panning out right now, and I think the technology, in fact, the three biggest technology areas which are panning out right now is digitization, decarbonization, which is with respect to how we are, as a world switching over to the alternative fuels and things like that, and energy security. I think the Ukraine war actually has thrown upon this prematurely on the world. So and as an industry thinker, how do you see technology panning out in the next 5 to 8 years, or let's say in the rest of this decade, how things are panning out with respect to technology?
Extremely relevant question. Extremely relevant question, because this decade is going to be dominated by technology. And we say that this century actually is a century of the minds. So, and it connects very well to the India growth story, where you can rein in the demographic dividends, provided you have the right skills, you have the right education, you have the right opportunities. And this is where it connects very well with that. And it also becomes imperative, how do we leverage that? Before I touch upon the common technology threads that run in, I think you talked about two very important levers, mobility and energy. So let me spend a couple of minutes to elaborate on that. In mobility space, if you look at the automotive sector today, I think passenger vehicles in that should be about 30 to 33 billion, in terms of its revenue. I think in next 5 years, this is going to be crossing 55 billion in terms of revenue, right? Automotive sector alone contributes about 2.5% of our GDP today, if I get the number right, 2.3, 2.4, so something around that. Within that, electric vehicles are going to be 7 billion by 2025. We're talking about huge number of jobs that are going to be created just by this new technology that's coming in mobility. We are the largest tractor market in the world, 650,000 plus agricultural tractors, which basically help us to grow food in our villages and bring rural prosperity. A very important dimensions of the rural economy if you take that today. I think we are probably second largest bus manufacturers in the world. We are the third largest commercial vehicle manufacturers in the world. We are the third largest construction equipment manufacturers in the world. Now, if you look at the growth potential on infrastructure within the construction equipment, the last numbers I read, we were about 6.5 or just under 7 billion in terms of revenue in construction. USA, which is one of the largest in construction equipment space today, they generate something like in excess of 20 billion a year. So you can normally doubles every 5 years. If by 2030 this has to exceed 10 billion, we're going to be probably much more than that. I think that the ICMA numbers were 3 times growth within the next 10 years. So all this is going to contribute to generation of employment and generation of opportunities while we build a nation. Now, within that, so therefore, mobility is going to be one huge driver of growth and one huge driver of generation of employment. Then you take the second aspect, which is energy. And I think in one of our topics, we were talking about how India can actually leverage the net zero opportunity by leading the world in terms of the energy transition. And I'll touch upon these two aspects later on when the youth of India today chooses careers. How the new careers of the future are going to be shaped by these emerging technologies. Then you take the common thread that run in the Industry 4.0, for example, the artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, the cyber physical systems, robotics and automation, drones, for example, is going to be a huge opportunity in the future, including defense, but also including equally the commercial use. Therefore, all these common threads will run in most of the things that happen today. As you were talking about, we were not born in the time when internet was there, but today internet is everything. So information is at your fingertips. You just need to know which questions to ask. Therefore, it requires a very different skill set today. But technology today is already dominating our lives, and that is set to even continue and grow further. And therefore, you will need deep skills into these various domains. You will need those ninja skills for anyone who wants to make a career for the future. And that brings a very different mindset, and that brings a very different set of opportunities that all these technology threads we spoke about will bring in for the nation, for the companies, for individuals. It's going to be defining almost everything around us in the coming future.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the world, I think today we are about 7.9 billion people on this earth. And the estimates are that by 2050, this earth will have about 9 billion or maybe 9.5 billion people. And most of this growth is actually coming from the African nations and some of the Asian nations, obviously including India. And in fact, if you look at the growth of this population, so what are the basic needs? I think the human needs are going to be the basic needs. I mean, the food, clothes, housing, infrastructure, education, entertainment, and so on and so forth. And of course, health. I think the health is going to be also a major factor which is there. So these top basic needs are going to only grow. And many times, some of my mentees, when they ask what career to take up, whether civil engineering will remain relevant, whether mechanical engineering will remain relevant, I say, I mean, if we are adding 1.5 billion people on this earth, the basic needs are only going to go up. If basic needs are going to go up, you need all basic businesses which are required to satisfy these needs. So while every tenet of those businesses will have technology, as you rightly mentioned, technology will actually dominate in every space, whether it is food or clothes or entertainment or health and so on and so forth. Everywhere technology will dominate. There's no doubt about it. So while core educations will remain relevant because those are also required for human consumption, at the same time adapting to technology in every space and constantly learning and relearning and upskilling is something which I think will remain the one of the most important factors for the future. So would you like to further elaborate on that?
I think you've touched upon extremely important points. And before really going to that, I think I remember my discussion in one of the IITs where everybody was very concerned, how do we attract the right talent into the tech space? Because the biggest irony was you get the best talent, and best talent goes to IITs to get the best academic qualifications, and then majority of that leaves the shores of India, goes to US or any other country and become investment bankers. I think that is not the trend that I see will continue. Firstly, people are looking for fulfillment. People are looking into to get the real productivity, the real impact of the education they require. At the same time, the skills that we see today, we don't even know what future is going to bring to us. One thing we know for sure, that this leap of technology and the, if you like, algorithmic growth of the tech space is going to just continue. And therefore, a lot of times the human mind, it is difficult to imagine what it is going to be like, the computing power. Like you remember, 30 years, 40 years ago, did we actually imagine what computers are going to be doing to us? We'll have chips, of the size less than, you can't even probably see whether it becomes molecular technology or the weight grows, the various laws, the 3 various laws we read in the digitization space. So it's really going to be beyond our imagination today. But one thing I know for sure, that we can't grow just by doing computer science, right? While the computer science is going to play a huge role. But when I see in the colleges, like it used to happen in our case, you would go for mechanical or electrical or electronics engineering, and we didn't know anything beyond that. I think that world has changed a lot, and the world will change a lot in the next 10 years' time, for sure. So therefore, it's important that we understand where our strengths lie before we choose the career. At the same time, you take the example of energy transition, and there are going to be trillions of dollars coming into funding of this energy transition in the world. And if fossil fuels are going to be replaced by, say, hydrogen, right? Take hydrogen opportunity, it's the most common molecule. You have, if any country has water, you talked about Africa, or where you have a lot of sun, you have a lot of water in India, for example, you have energy security. Why do you then import fossil fuels and pay billions of dollars into that? So now hydrogen is the work of a chemical engineer, right? You don't need any code writing for that. You need chemical engineering skills. We are talking about ethanol economy. How do we generate ethanol from sugarcane that we grow? How do we use ethanol into the energy equation and replace fossil fuels? Our electricity today is produced mostly by coal. How do we go from coal to a different fuels? So therefore, you will need every kind of skill into the future, not just the computer science. Of course, computer science is going to play a huge role. You take electrical engineering. The mobility today is going to be running on electric motors and inverters. And for that, you need software skills, you need electrical motors technology skills, and and therefore it's going to be brand new skill space that is going to be opening over there. So my message to everybody is that don't go after the rat race of doing just one branch. If you are good at today, let's say a civil engineering, you can create the infrastructure of tomorrow with that, right? You can build bridges, you can make this wonderful infra innovations which China did, for example. It's amazing to see some of the things they do. So one should recognize one's strengths. You should have a passion inside, right? And on that passion, you can build your future. What I'm trying to say that, yes, there was a time when you did not have enough employment opportunity. So you will take the particular course, which basically gave you a easiest job. And I think that time is going to change. If tomorrow you are an IoT expert, right, it doesn't matter which degree you carry. If you are an Internet of Things expert, you are bringing connected technologies, you are going to be paid and you are going to be hired. Similarly, tomorrow you are going to be an artificial intelligence expert or you are a cybersecurity expert. Your skills will matter, not your degree, right? And that's where I think people should focus for the future.
Very well said, sir. Because the way I see it, by 2030 and beyond, most of our school children who are right now in 8th, 9th grade, by 2030 they will get into a professional career, and keep telling them that do not focus and think about that the world will offer you jobs, because by 2030 there may not be many jobs. There will be some jobs, obviously. Maybe if there are 100 jobs today, there could be just 20 jobs by 2030, which means that 80 jobs will become professional contracts. And those contracts will need every kind of skill. It is not just the skill of coding, because an organization cannot run only just by coding. So, and if we are addressing the issues or the needs of the 1 billion or 1.5 billion people who are going to get added in the next 1.5 decade, you need to be good at any one of the areas of the need of the humankind. Actually, if we are able to address one of them through your skill, I think you will be gainfully employed. And the most important factor, I think what Mr. Arora mentioned, is that you should have interest in that. If you have interest in that, you will obviously excel in your skill. I think very well point which you brought out. And it is actually very relevant for especially school children who are right now in their high school. And of course, it is also very important for all the professionals who are working in different levels of their lives. I think you need to be watching out that the automation is something which is going to happen and more. And moving towards contracts is a reality which you should accept and be ready, be prepared for the future. Yeah. So moving on, since you are from the industry of agriculture, automotive, and the construction equipment field, so take us through your innovation journey in terms of how you see the technologies panning out. Especially, I think we know that Internet of Things are a reality today in most of the construction equipment, in most of the automotive sector. I don't know much about whether agri sector has taken up IoT so much or not. But one thing which is very evident cutting across all the industry, especially the mobility industry and the off-highway industry, is that alternative fuels. I think that's going to be a big reality going forward. So take us through your perspective of how you are seeing those panning out in the next 8 to 10 years.
So I think the opportunities and the challenges are actually two sides of the same coin. So everybody is going to be moving on the energy transition curve first and foremost, because I've seen that in certain parts of the world, in certain segments of customers, the transition is much more accelerated than the OEMs thought would happen. Whether it is moving from fossil fuels to electric or fossil fuels to hydrogen, there are certain countries and certain segments who are under the mission of a net zero are going to be putting the same demands on the equipment, whether it is the mobility sector or whether it is the construction equipment sector. So I think this is one area which certainly is going to define the next 10 years. How the question is how fast and how much, what percentage of the fossil fuels will be replaced. The IoT opportunity that I mentioned before is an amazing opportunity, and that is defining all aspects of the equipment operation, not just the operations and productivity and the uptime of the equipment, but at the same time, they're also defining the customer relationships. So IoT is going to be very big. And I recall fondly, I think a few years back, when we were launching LiveLink, which was first in industry in India. It was a homegrown system which was deployed, and we took a decision to do it on 100% of our machines. And that time we weren't very sure, how customers will really adopt that and whether it will be considered a value or not. But we just took a decision. And today, each of our customer and each of the stakeholders in the chain, by the way, including OEMs and dealerships, this is the most potent weapon you have to basically determine the so many aspects of connected technologies unfolded that probably we didn't think at the time when we were launching the IoT. And by the way, this LiveLink was way ahead than the rest of the, I'm not talking industry within construction, I'm talking automotive and commercial as well. So we were right at the forefront. And I think that was one really very, very good experience and very, very good sense of accomplishment I think we all had. So IoT is going to continue to play a huge role. And I remember even in the automotive space when we were looking into mobility, and I remember I had an opportunity to chair CII's National Subcommittee on Mobility. We actually established IoT as one very big space, trillions of dollar opportunity on the industries around it and how the value systems on the data were built. It is a huge space on its own. Again, one of the common threads that I was speaking about will run into every aspect of our business. So IoT was one such example. And then you take automation, assisted technologies. We talked about software, not just the code writing in computer science, but software into the tech space of mobility. Today, the whole equipment's working. It's whether your car runs faster, whether you have a different pickup for a different zones, you can actually change the customer experiences from the product just from the power of the code that runs behind the technology. So therefore, the ECUs, the way you put the canvases, where you put the sensors on the machine, and then you write softwares which determine the various productivity and performance aspects of construction equipment. That area itself is very, very big in terms of the opportunities of requirement of deep skills, but at the same time, how you can scale up these skills into other parts of the use cases. Then you are talking about safety, then you're talking about emissions. We are already running, I think, at various stages of the diesel emissions, which eventually have to go to a clean diesel approach till the fossil fuels are replaced. The diesel has to run clean, minimizing the CO2 and the NOx emission that requires a lot of challenge into that. The operator requirements are going to be more and more, where you are more productive, you are more comfortable into your environment, you have more ease of use features at your fingertips. You can have a technology in the vehicle, but the operators doesn't have to feel that there's a technology, because the way you use it, it should be like an iPhone versus any other experience. So there's a lot going on in there. I think in the future you will also see probably autonomous and the micro equipment that will define the future of construction, especially into the urban spaces. The features required in the new cities will change on the construction equipment. For example, the urban machines might require different features. Into the agriculture space, you actually touched upon very rightly the precision farming using artificial intelligence. Drones, for example, they map the crops, they understand whether crops are healthy or not. With the data sitting behind, you can actually predict what the weather patterns are going to be. You can see that with the way world is changing around us, your sowing season and reaping season doesn't have to be the same that was 20 years ago, because the weather patterns have changed. There's a global warming, unfortunately, which is causing a lot of disturbance. So you can have a lot of early warning signals. And I think in the agriculture space, there's a lot that India can do, because of a large population that depends on to agriculture. I think we will, whatever I have seen, there's a lot of good work happening, but this work has to really scale up much more. Mobility, I think we already touched. So therefore, the opportunities are tremendous, actually, and all these aspects are accelerating the change. The COVID has just accelerated the change, which was probably happening, but now it's much, much faster and much certain, in terms of what we are seeing in all these industry spaces.
Great. And obviously, you see all these technology changes also panning out with respect to the front end also, in the sense whether it is the distribution channel in which the actual delivery of the service or the product happens. How much do you see technology also affecting that? I mean, are we also seeing large scale automation in the distribution system also?
Definitely. So the power of digitization is going to redefine the after sales completely. Today there are cases I've seen where you don't need to go to the dealership first of all to buy a machine. The machine can be booked online, it can be delivered at your doorstep. You can touch and feel using today's AR and VR technologies. You can actually, right from the buying experience, customer's experience, all the way to the delivery or after sales service. I think it's almost redefined, and it's disrupted in many ways. Today, you can train your operators using the AR and VR stuff. You see that how online buying experience into the commercial space has already happened. The consumer behavior have changed, and the way you sell and promote your products have changed. So same things are going to be impacting this part of the industry as well. And when we spoke about those cyber physical opportunities that digitization can bring, I think it is only limited by our imagination. These technologies can very drastically change the way you do things today, where you bring a much more enhanced customer experience with much less cost and much more effect in terms of what you want to achieve, in terms of effectiveness of what you want to deliver, whether it is service, whether it is the customer experience you're talking about. Everything will change in a very, very big way.
Okay, moving on, sir. You mentioned about obviously this in your earlier part where you talked about the emission norms. I think that is a key area at a global level, at a national level as well, not just at an organizational level, because the challenge I think in the COP27 meeting, there is a push for banning coal by 2040, which is, I don't know how India is going to cope for it, because that would be very optimistic or very bold target to achieve for India. But obviously there will be a lot of pressure on organizations to also become somebody who is living by the philosophy of net zero emission. So the net zero emission is going to be a philosophy for the organization's operations as well as for its products and services. So in that, I think the automotive sector, obviously the automobile sector especially, has moved quite rapidly on the EV space. But how do you see that transition happening for especially the agri-based industry as well as for the off-highway industry?
Yeah, I think most critical point of our time today is the global warming, and it's very, very close to my heart. At the same time, I believe the India solution doesn't have to be same as what rest of the world adopts. Our solutions have to be specific to our needs. Our solutions have to be innovative, and our solutions have to be fast and accelerated. I think we all human inhabitants living on this planet face a very critical juncture of the lifetime of this planet. Now, the generation which is going to be included, by the way, we are, if I take today's time, call generation as one big community living on earth today, we are the first to really see this challenge. And I can tell you that if we don't act fast and if we don't act effectively, we might be the last generation also to see this today. So therefore, there's a lot of responsibility into the hands of the human inhabitants of this planet at this time. Next 8 years are going to define make and break for the planet. We are emitting today in excess of 50 billion tons of carbon dioxide. And the last 100 odd years of industrialization has really put a lot of threats due to the global warming on the very existence of a lot of things around us. If you imagine what happened, the Australian bushfires, the thing that I'm sitting here is, it reminds me, what happened a few years ago, the Australian bushfires. I think it was something like 10, 12, something like million hectares of land that caught fire, the bushfires. And almost 3 billion animals died, right? So therefore, the environmental challenges are real. If you look at how Amazon rainforests are being destroyed today, sheer human greed, right? And with no checks. There are journalists getting killed who are reporting that, for example. We are cutting today 15 billion trees every year on Earth, right? 15 billion trees. So I think one of the key messages through your channel that we should really, really try and give, we have to save this planet. It's such an amazing world around us. And therefore, under that big picture, each of us as human beings, each of the business entities that are operating and generating profit today, each of the countries, each of the society, this is a common challenge. I think at the same time, I don't want to be an alarmist. I also want to be an optimist, that if we all work in the right direction, we can pull it back. I remember maybe a couple of decades ago, there was a huge threat of ozone into our atmosphere. And you remember that time, a lot of refrigerants were banned. And when we were buying refrigerator, they said, no, you can't use this particular refrigerant because it is going to cause ozone layer threat, which will burn a hole in the atmosphere and something will happen. We pulled it back actually. We pulled it back. The effects were there. I think a similar thing can happen with the greenhouse gases, which is like 75% CO2, but also 18-20% methane, which we produce. So when we were speaking earlier of the hydrogen transition, when we were speaking earlier about different aspects, I think the planet survival has to be on to the top agenda in every boardroom. We see a lot of talk, but I am not sure right now in India versus what I saw during my stint when I was actually in UK. There was a lot more talk, a lot more businesses were talking about net zero than I see here today. But I think it's probably a lag of few months. So this will come back on the board agendas. I'm very sure about it. And it's all our responsibilities to put it back on the board agenda. But some companies I see are doing really good. In our own portfolio today in JCB, we have real sale on EV, for example, versus some of the other companies that have achieved. We are also working on hydrogen. As you must have seen, JCB has its first hydrogen backhoe and the first hydrogen telehandler, which you're going to see. So we are making our own efforts, and I presume every boardroom, this will be sustainability will be on top of the agenda, and that has to be on top of the agenda of every human being, I believe.
I'm sure. I think the automotive sector, especially the passenger car segment, is definitely galloping towards that.
Yeah.
And the commercial vehicle segment also, I mean, some of the, I think there is a move towards EV for especially the buses. And also there are, I think, experiments on the commercial vehicles, which are for the freight as well. What I really don't know is that how much the agri sector is trying to move in that direction, or is there any movement in that direction?
Yeah, I think if you see the potential for biogas, or the potential of the we spoke about ethanol. Instead of burning for example, you see what happens on the pollution. Instead of burning the crop residue, you convert it into, so waste to energy is going to be the key for agriculture sector. And a lot of these things, which I've seen a lot of agencies in India are working towards that, which is what I was talking about, India's specific solution. They're either carbon neutral, or they actually consume more carbon. They actually take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So what you call carbon negative, I think you call those. So carbon neutral, definitely. So whether it is ethanol, biogas, those fuels, and therefore how do our vehicles adopt to those biofuels? You saw recent launch of a Toyota car running on ethanol, 100% ethanol. Brazil has taken a lot of leadership on that as well. So therefore agriculture will play a huge role. There are very heartening example I see where some of the villages have become carbon neutral. Can you imagine that? How progressive a village can be if you consume all your electricity coming from solar energy. I think there's probably an example in Gujarat that recently was announced. So therefore, our rural economy opportunities, our rural sector leadership, going from waste to biofuels to energy, all those things will play a role into a transition away from fossil fuels.
Fascinating. And I'm sure, I think such examples will only proliferate more and more as we go along, because that's the need of the hour, as you mentioned rightly. Sir, coming to the next one, a lot of young students who are probably in the high school or college, they are going to see this episode, and also there are a lot of professionals who are going to also see us, because especially people who are associated with the automotive sector, the construction equipment sector. I think a lot of them are going to see this episode as well. So what would be your advice to these two core segment of people? First to the students and then on to the professionals.
I think first of all, connecting with the youth always energizes me. So, we all feel young with that. And I think this generation has a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. Firstly, all of us, of course, but much more effect will be on the generation of today, what actions we are taking on the environment. But specifically to the youth, I jotted down 4 or 5 points, just before this call, which I believe I want to communicate. So I've got 5 really takeaways, or whatever you say, for the youth of today. Firstly, I want to say that discover your passion, right? Discover your passion. You have to build excellence into whatever you do. So aim to be the best, right? And you need not to follow that if everybody is going after computer science. Well, I by the way, I have a lot of passion for computer science. I'm not in any way. It of course is going to build the future in many ways and making us a superpower. But it's not the only thing. What I'm saying is, tomorrow you are better at doing something else, then go for it and be the best at that. Point number 2 is that do not be deterred by failures. Failures are just a step towards success. It leaves you with a lot of learnings. It teaches you resilience in life. So every failure is a step towards success. So do not be deterred by that. Right? That's a very important message. Number 2. Number 3, I wrote down adapt, because the world is going to remain very volatile. World is going to remain very uncertain. I'm using a cliche word of VUCA, which we all used to hear some years back, and now it's the reality. We are now feeling what VUCA is. So V for volatile, U uncertain, ambiguous. You can read what VUCA is, and the world is going to be like that. And therefore, your skills to adapt will make you shine always. COVID, for example, taught us a lot of adaptations, and nobody knew actually what to do during those days. The 4th point is hard work. Hard work is the key, and you must always have a part of you where you're enjoying your life. I'm not saying that, all the while, but hard work is the key, and you should always make it a very important weapon in your hand if you really want to be successful. And number 5 is, be grounded in your core. Each human being has limitless potential inside. And this is the thought leadership of our country, that we have, all the wise men we had on this land said only one thing: every human being is very special. You are a very special person walking on this planet, and you have limitless, boundless energy inside you. You just have to tap into that. So these are the 5 things I thought I will leave through you, this message to the youth of today.
And what would be your advice to the professionals who are currently working in different levels of their professional life? And
Yes.
Life is going to be impacted for all of us. I think the future is already here. I think I am of the opinion is that the future is not 2030. Future is already here. We have to start adapting. I think what you mentioned earlier is adaptation is something which I believe we should start doing it right now. But then what is that you would like to say to professionals?
I think if I see these 5 things basically apply to anyone, right?
Yeah.
But on top of that, I'll probably leave a couple of messages more for professionals. First and foremost, I think you should be prepared for uncertainties in life at every time, because the world is going to be uncertain. Now, to deal with that, one must be multi-skilled, and you can't remain in doing one particular thing all the time. You will see yourself when you have peaked your learning in that particular field. Either your learning curve has to continue to grow. If you think either in your current role or into your current domain, your learning curve is becoming flat, means it is time for you to change. Time for you to change your domain. Time for you to change your current project or a challenge, time for you to maybe change your current role. Because if you are multi-skilled, if you have experience in more than one domain, or if you have really a deep skill into whatever you do, these are all going to be weapons in your armory to deal with the future, right? And otherwise, these 5 or 6 things which I left is actually true for everybody, that you can do what you want to do, but you must do what you like to do. So you have to remain passionate about what you do. You have to bring hard work to whatever you do. You have to make every day count. If not every minute and every hour count, make at least every day count. And just enjoy your life. Life is short and life is uncertain, but it's also beautiful life around you. So just enjoy that as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sir, this was a most fascinating episode I had with all my guests. So thank you for sharing all your insights and taking us through your own journey and your own insights about how you see the world shaping up. And I'm sure those advice which you gave to young people in the last segment will be very, very useful. And it is relevant, as you rightly said, it is relevant for all of us, I think. So with those words, I thank you once again to be with us.
Dr. Mishra, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the time, and it's been really wonderful to be with you today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And all the very best.
Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. We sincerely wish you could take something from our conversation today and be able to apply it to your life in a positive way. We value your feedback. This can help us improve our future episodes. So share your thoughts to serve you better. If you want us to focus on a topic which you think is of importance, let us know. We will share our expertise in future episodes. So, see you soon with a new topic and help you in your career journey.